Hi, I'm Dominic O'Brien. I'm an 8 times world memory champion, and I've recently been made memory ambassador for Centrum Silver. I'm going to be giving you a brief background of what it takes to become a memory champion. I'm going to give you a short demonstration, and I'm going to show you, explain how I do it by getting you to perform a feat of memory yourselves, and then we'll go into the practical benefits of all this. Now, when I'm introduced as a memory champion, people are not quite sure what to expect. Have I got a photographic memory? In fact, I've never met anybody with a photographic memory. I'm not sure it exists. Or do I have a super high IQ? Well, I don't have any of those things. In fact, the opposite is quite true. When I was young, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. I had a terrible memory. I couldn't concentrate. I left school when I was 16. So what happened? Well, in 1987, at the age of 30, I turned on the television and I saw a guy called Creighton Carvello, and he was memorizing a deck of cards, which he did in about 3 minutes. And I thought, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. How does he do it? So just to give you some of the background of it, I trained my memory because I just wanted to memorize cards. But then I was invited to enter the World Memory Championships in 1991. We have to have marathon tests. You have thousands of numbers to memorize in an hour. About 30 packs of playing cards to memorize in an hour. These days, 11,000 binary digits, ones and zeros. You have to get the exact order. Abstract images, words, names and faces, dates, that sort of thing. And it takes place over 3 days. Now, you're probably thinking, what is the point in doing all this? Because computers can store this information. And I would normally say, well, what's the point in running around a track 400 meters, just going around in circles? Or what's the point in throwing a javelin across a field? It's not the point of the javelin going across the field, it's how it gets there. That's the art and the science of anything involved in athletics. It's not the numbers in my head that's important, but how it gets there is not just an art and a science, but I believe it reveals the very essence of the learning process. I'm going to give you a demonstration of what it takes to do this sort of thing. One of the most difficult ones is the digit span. Now, from the age of about 20, 25, you should comfortably be able to memorize 6 numbers forwards and backwards at the rate of 1 digit a second. When you get to about 30, 35, it's more like 5 or 6. 50, or in my case, I'm in my 60s now, it's more like 4, possibly 5, which is pretty sad. That's all you can hold in your short-term memory. Now, I'm going to buck the trend. I'm not going to cheat, but I'm going to use a technique. I'm going to be using my working memory. And working memory is slightly different to short-term memory. It means it enables you to do something whilst something else is carrying on. It enables you to keep something in mind. So I've got a number generator here, and I'm going to get this to randomly generate some numbers. I promise you this isn't being fixed up. I don't know what's going to come up. If I see a single number, I'm going to call that 0, 7, or 0, 0. So I'm going to look at these numbers. I want you to try and memorize them at the same time. I'm going to look at 40 digits. Okay, try this yourselves, and off we go. 38. 59. 75. 12. 02, 01, 73, 58, 43, 86, 06, 70, 25, 20, 83, 77, 15, 3-5. Seven, 8, and the last two digits, 2, 3. Okay, those numbers filter through my little brain cells, grey cells. All right, I think I've got the number. I'm going to keep my eyes closed, and I'm going to start reciting them from the beginning. So it starts with 3, 8, 5, 9, 7, 5, 1, 2, 0, 2, 0, 1, 7, 3, 5, 8, 4, 3. Now I'm going to stop at that 3, and I'm going to go to the end and do the number in reverse and go back to the 3 if I can. I'm going to try and make it more challenging. So the very last number was a 3, so going in reverse it was then a 2, an 8, a 7, 5, 3, 5, 1, 7, 7, 3, 8, 0, 2, 5, 2, 0, 7, 6, 0, 6, 8, and then we're back at the 3. Now, I think I've got that right. How did you get on? I'm not supposed to be able to do that at the age of 67, but I'm using my working memory, which means I can keep that information in my head as I'm calling them. Normally, I would think of 4 digits at a time. So what I'm using is what I call the journey method. I'm coding pairs of numbers into people. So the first pair of numbers, let's say it's 10, would be Dudley Moore, the famous actor, because he was in the film 10. If the second number is 76, then I imagine him playing the trombone, because the second pair of numbers is an action. And the way I remembered the order of these people and actions was to use a journey around a house I used to live in as a kid. So I imagine the first 4 numbers in my drive, the second 4 numbers in the front garden, the next 4 in the living room, kitchen, and so on. Now, interestingly, that information will stay in my memory for a good 24 hours. I don't need to think about it again. If I want to, I can keep that number in my head forever, and that's the secret of the art of reviewing, which I'll get into a bit later. So what are the practical benefits of doing something like this? Well, as you can see, it's a very powerful technique. You can buck the short-term memory, and you can do it with anything. So instead of numbers, that could be a list of topics that you want to give as a speech, or it could be a shopping list. It could be anything. It could be 100 words of a foreign language. I'm going to show you a very simple technique called the link method. Sometimes people call it the story method. So I'm going to give you 11 words pretty quickly. You shouldn't be able to memorize them, but here we go. Okay, we have stone, lake, boat, telescope, bench, eagle, drone, tower, steps, door, Superman. Now, if you've memorized 11 of those, then you're using a technique. Now, you can probably remember Superman. This is called the von Restorff effect. That's something that's unusual. And also, it was the last one on the list. You could probably remember the beginning, which was a stone. But some of the other words will get confused. Right, imagine you're standing by a lake. You've got a large stone. You throw the stone into the lake, which is the second word, and it creates ripples. And the ripples land on a boat, which is the third word. Standing on the boat is somebody looking through a telescope to the other side of the lake. So let's quickly review that. We're using pictures, and we're also using cause and effect. Stone, lake, causing the ripples, to the boat, the telescope. Right, let's continue now. So this person is looking through the telescope, and they can see on the other side of the lake a bench. Let's give it a color. Let's make it light blue or something like that. Perched on this bench is an eagle, a bird of prey, and it's looking up in the sky, and it can see a drone flying across the sky. Lots of drones around these days. So being a bird of prey, it flies up, touches hold of this drone with its talons, and it flies to the very far end of the lake and drops the drone on an old disused tower. There's no roof, it's dropping on the tower. Imagine yourself in this scenario. You see this drone landing on the tower, you're at the top. You then walk down the steps. There are no windows in the tower. It's getting darker and darker and darker till you get to the bottom and you see there's a door there. You can just see the light coming through it. And there's a knock on the door. You open the door and there's Superman. Why he's there, nobody knows. That's up to your imagination. Now, can you repeat all 11 words? The stone, the lake. See if you can do it before I say the word. The boat, telescope, looking at the light blue bench, the eagle, looking at the drone, dropping it on the tower, steps, getting darker, door, Superman. Now, I'm not going to get you to do it, but you could easily go backwards and show off like I did with that number just by reversing the story. So it's cause and effect. One object leads to the next in a logical fashion. And there's no limit to this. You can do anything, but it's very useful. If, again, if you want to remember a speech, you could use the story method or link method. So what's going on with the brain here? Well, we know that the brain, you have two brains, left and right hemisphere. The left is responsible for things like sequencing information, being logical, reason. There's a big language center there as well. And the right is more to do with processing images, spatial awareness, that sort of thing. So with these techniques, you're using the whole of your brain. You're using all of the functions of your brain, which is why it works so well. It's a natural technique for memorizing practically anything. What about names and faces? This is something that we struggle with. We're very good naturally or instinctively at remembering a face. We need to know if someone's going to pose a danger or not. But what about putting the name to it? Now we're living in a multicultural society, very difficult. But again, the three keys really to developing a memory are the use of association. Carrot, you think of rabbit. Cat, you think of mouse, etc. The use of location, which I've mentioned already. And then finally, your powerful imagination. There's a good acronym then, Ali, as in Muhammad Ali. So with names and faces, if you see somebody, try to get them to perform their names. That's one of the techniques. If you see somebody called Carol, imagine her singing a Christmas carol. If you meet somebody called Mike Barker, who's a salesman, and you really need to remember his name, maybe he's a car salesman or something, imagine Mike holding a microphone. And what about Barker? You could either have him barking like a dog, or maybe logically you could have a barcode which he's about to fix to his car windscreen to sell it. I use little tricks and tips like if somebody reminds me of somebody else, I could use their location to store the name. I've got a friend of mine called Adrian. The way I remembered his name originally was I imagined him kneeling on the floor praying, because as a kid I was brought up as a Catholic and I can remember a priest called Father Adrian. If I hear the name Julia, I've got a friend of mine, Julia, who's always flicking her hair in a certain way. So I imagine the person I'm meeting called Julia doing the same thing. There's lots of tricks and tips for remembering names, but it's all about using association and locations. Finally, it's all very well using these techniques, but how do you keep the information there for the long term? And that's where the art of review comes into it. There was a German psychologist called Ebbinghaus, and he discovered that you need to review something before it starts to go into your long-term memory. He also came up with a thing called the forgetting curve. And it's interesting, you lose a lot of information if you don't review it after 20 minutes of studying something. So it's absolutely key that you start to do your first review within about 10 minutes of studying something. That means you've got the information there for a good 24 hours. But again, if you don't review it after 24 hours, there is a decline in what you can remember. So review it after 24 hours, then you've got it for about 5 to 7 days. After a week, you review again, you've got it for about 3 to 4 weeks. And if you can still remember it after 3 to 4 weeks, your next review will be 3 to 6 months, and then you should have it for life. Now that's a rule of thumb. Obviously, if it's really complicated material, then you need to have more intervals when you're reviewing the information. But it's probably education's biggest secret, that everything that's taught in school is most probably forgotten after 24 hours because students don't know this simple rule. My advice to you is try to memorize a list of information. Just do it rote like we're taught at school. Don't use any techniques. Write down your score and then use a story or some kind of technique to piece the objects, the words together, and you will see a truly significant improvement. Good luck, and I may see you at the next World Memory Championships.